In the heart of ancient Athens, where marble temples gleamed under the Mediterranean sun and philosophers debated in the agora, there lived a man who seemed, to the casual eye, utterly destitute. His name was Diogenes of Sinope, and his home was not a villa, not a stone house, not even a humble hut, but a large clay storage jar, what we today might casually call a barrel. Inside this jar, he kept almost nothing. A cloak. A staff. A small cup for water, until the day he saw a boy drinking from his hands, at which point Diogenes threw even the cup away, declaring, "A child has surpassed me in simplicity." He slept where the sun fell, rose with the daylight, and lived accompanied by a few stray dogs, his only companions and, fittingly, his philosophical namesakes, for the word cynic comes from the Greek kynikos, dog-like. Diogenes was mocked by many for his ragged clothes and austere life, but he held something that eluded kings, an unshakable sovereignty over himself. One day, as the story goes, Alexander of Macedon, already called the Great by his contemporaries, came to meet him. Alexander had conquered half the known world. His banners flew over cities from Greece to Persia, his armies were loyal unto death, and his word could shape the destinies of entire nations. Yet when he approached Diogenes, he found no awe, no kneeling, no scrambling for favor, only the unbothered philosopher, lying in the sunlight. Alexander, perhaps amused, perhaps genuinely respectful, asked the beggar in the barrel. "I am Alexander, and I can grant you any wish. What do you desire?" Diogenes looked up at the man who commanded empires, squinted against the sunlight now blocked by Alexander's imposing figure, and said simply, "Yes. Stand out of my sunlight." No flattery. No petition. Just a request for the king to remove the only thing he was truly obstructing, the warmth and light freely given by nature. Later, Alexander reportedly said to his companions, "If I were not Alexander, I would wish to be Diogenes." Here's the part history textbooks rarely explore. Why would the most powerful man in the world envy a homeless philosopher who slept in a jar? Because Diogenes had something Alexander's armies could never seize. Something no amount of gold could buy. Something Alexander's own conquests had actually taken from him, complete sovereignty over his own existence. Alexander ruled the world, but Diogenes ruled himself. This is where the hidden lesson begins. The pattern in history. If you study the lives of history's most dangerous creators, empire builders, and minds that reshaped human thought, you'll notice a strange pattern. They all shared one trait, a trait that modern society has trained you to see as a flaw, a weakness, a symptom of incompleteness. They lived in radical independence. Not just financial independence, not just independence of movement, but independence of thought, of values, of purpose. And society fears this kind of man. Why? Because he can't be easily bought, swayed, or manipulated. He has no leash to pull, no master to please, no emotional hostage that can be taken to force his compliance. That is why the story of Diogenes is rarely taught beyond a few lines in school. Not because it's unimportant, but because it's dangerous. If you understood that a man in a barrel could be freer than a king on a throne, you might start questioning the very script you've been given for your own life. Nietzsche's challenge, eternal recurrence. Centuries after Diogenes turned away an emperor, another philosopher posed a question so sharp it could split a man's soul in two. His name was Friedrich Nietzsche, and he called it the eternal recurrence. The test was simple in phrasing, but brutal in implication. If a demon were to visit you in the night and declare, "This life you are living now, every pain, every joy, every shame, every triumph. You will have to live again, exactly the same, for all eternity," would you curse him, or would you bless him? This isn't a thought experiment you answer lightly. It's a mirror, one that shows you how you've actually been living, without excuses, without edits. For most men, the answer is instant recoil. They're living a life scripted by others, shaped by parental expectations, social norms, the gravitational pull of what people do. They've traded their wild, untamed potential for predictable patterns, for compromise disguised as harmony, for safety dressed up as success. Their days are a chain of obligations not born from their own will. And the thought of living it again forever is not just depressing, it's unbearable. But then there's another kind of man. When he hears the demon's challenge, he doesn't flinch. His lips curve into a slow, dangerous smile. Why? Because he has lived, and is living, a life that is entirely his own. Every choice, every mistake, every achievement bears his signature alone. To him, the eternal recurrence is not a curse. It's confirmation. It means that the life he has built is one he would choose again and again, without hesitation. And here's the fracture line: this difference between the recoiling man and the smiling man comes down to one thing: sovereignty over one's own existence. Nietzsche understood that greatness could not be built on borrowed values. You can't construct a life worth reliving if you're still asking permission to live it. The solitude of creation. History whispers this truth again and again: the highest works of mind, art, and empire are born not from constant company, but from chosen solitude. Look at Arthur Schopenhauer. He lived unmarried, in a manner almost monastic. Mornings were for writing, meticulous, disciplined, uninterrupted. Afternoons were for walking alone, letting thought stretch their legs through the parks of Frankfurt. Evenings were for books, for music, for his beloved poodle, Atma. Critics called him misanthropic, a hater of humanity. But Schopenhauer was not running from people, he was running toward clarity. He once wrote, "A man can be himself only so long as he is alone. If he does not love solitude, he will not love freedom, for it is only when he is alone that he is truly free." Now, think about Napoleon Bonaparte. Could he have conquered Europe if every evening was spent securing Josephine's approval for his military plans? Think about Albert Einstein. Could he have bent the laws of physics if he had been constantly negotiating date nights instead of spending hours in obsessive, solitary thought? Marriage, whatever else it might offer, demands compromise. And compromise is poison to the kind of conviction that changes the world. Where greatness demands a singular vision, marriage requires consensus. Where innovation demands pure, undiluted focus, marriage asks you to filter everything through another person's fears, desires, and limitations. The result? The married man's vision is divided. The solitary man's vision is pure. And in purity, there is danger, the kind of danger that alters history. The will to power and the marriage trap. Nietzsche's will to power was never about ruling over others in the cheap sense, it was about ruling over yourself so completely that your life becomes an act of creation. It is the force that drives the artist to paint, the general to conquer, the thinker to shatter old truths and forge new ones. But here's the uncomfortable truth. This power, the deepest current in a man's soul, can be split, drained, or redirected until it no longer fuels creation. Marriage, for many men, becomes exactly that. Not because the wife is malicious, though sometimes she is, but because the institution itself demands constant negotiation of energy. A man wants to dedicate a year to building his vision, but there are bills, family plans, and quality time expectations. A man wants to take a risk that could change his destiny, but the risk threatens stability, and stability is the altar at which marriage worships. A man wants to live with wild intensity, but marriage tames wildness by design. The married man spends half his willpower on the battlefield and half justifying why he's on the battlefield at all. The unmarried man. Every drop of his energy goes into the fight. And history shows us the pattern. The most dangerous, most world-altering men almost always stood alone at the critical points of their rise. They were unbound, unpermissioned, unsoftened. The reckoning. This is not an anti-woman argument. This is not a bitter man's lament. This is a cold, historical, psychological observation. A man cannot serve two masters, the master of his destiny and the master of domestic peace, without one destroying the other. And here's the hard edge. If you choose marriage, choose it knowing that it will either be the anchor that holds you steady or the anchor that drags you down. The difference depends on whether the woman beside you shares your mission to the marrow, or whether she becomes the mission. Most men never notice when that subtle switch happens. One day, their purpose is an unshakable tower. The next day, they're building extensions and side rooms to make it comfortable for someone else, until the tower is no longer a tower, it's just a house. The choice of the sovereign man. The sovereign man is not against love. He is not against intimacy. But he guards the one thing that can never be replaced, his trajectory. He does not kneel before the collective script. The herd moves as if hypnotized, repeating inherited lines, chasing inherited goals, mistaking obedience for belonging. But he refuses the role. He will not let the weight of tradition crush the architecture of his own mind. He does not confuse peace with passivity. For him, peace is not the absence of motion, it is the mastery of motion. It is not the stillness of stagnation, but the stillness of a predator poised to strike, calm because he is in control, not because he has surrendered. He does not mistake shared comfort for shared purpose. A warm room can still be a prison. Laughter can still be a leash. Not every hand that feeds you wants you to grow strong, some simply want you to stay tame. He knows that comfort without alignment is the slowest form of decay. If he marries, it is because the union sharpens his steel. It is because her presence magnifies his will to power, fuels his vision, and strengthens the fortress of his sovereignty. She must be a co-architect, not a decoration. A comrade in conquest, not an anesthetic for loneliness. If he remains alone, it is not because he fears intimacy, it is because he will not dilute his mission with anything that does not feed it. He knows solitude can be a crucible where vision becomes unbreakable. He will endure the nights of silence because they are the price of uncorrupted clarity. The question is no longer the hollow, tired, should a man marry? That's the language of men still negotiating with the crowd. The real question is, will this choice make my life so wholly mine that I would live it again, exactly the same, for eternity? If the answer is yes, bless the demon. Let him nod in approval as you step into a fate worth repeating forever. If the answer is no, thank him for the warning. And then change your life until you can meet his gaze without shame. Strip away the excess. Burn the false obligations. Rebuild until you stand in a life so alive that you could live it again without a single edit. Because history will not remember the man who compromised himself into comfort. No statue is raised for the one who traded his fire for a softer bed. No epic is written for the man who slowly became invisible in his own life story. It will remember the man who built something so great, so dangerous, and so undeniable. That eternity itself could not tire of watching him live it. A life not measured in years, but in echoes. A life that, once lived, makes death itself seem almost irrelevant. History's most dangerous men have always answered this question without flinching. Diogenes looked at Alexander the Great, the man who ruled half the known world, and told him to stand out of my sunlight. He didn't care for titles, armies, or crowns. His empire was his own mind, and no king could trespass. Alexander, for all his glory, envied the beggar's freedom. He could conquer cities, but not himself. Nietzsche took it further, declaring that the highest man is the one who shapes himself as an artist shapes stone, chisel blow by chisel blow, until the raw material becomes a masterpiece of will. Not a servant of the age, but a creator of it. The common man will spend his life seeking approval, from the family, the crowd, the tribe, the faceless, they. The higher man will spend his life seeking truth, even if it makes him an enemy to the very world he was born into. And when he acts, he does not ask, will they understand? He asks only, will I be proud to live this day again for eternity? This is the eternal recurrence test, Nietzsche's most merciless thought experiment. Imagine a demon telling you, you will have to live this life exactly as you have lived it, again and again, for all of time. Every joy, every mistake, every triumph, every humiliation, the same sequence, forever. If that thought crushes you, then you are living a life unworthy of yourself. If that thought electrifies you, then you have already become the rarest of men. Most will compromise until they dissolve into mediocrity. They will trade away their fire for applause, for comfort, for a place at the table of the tame. But the man who passes the demon's test will not be remembered for fitting in. He will be remembered for bending reality into the shape of his will. For building something so sharp, so radiant, and so immortal that the centuries will still speak his name in a whisper, half in awe, half in fear. And when the demon comes for him, there will be no trembling. Only a smile, and a single word. Again. You will not find this standard in the world's advice columns. You will not find it in the sermons of the meek, nor in the lectures of the contented. Because if men began to live by it, entire economies of manipulation would collapse overnight. They need you half awake. They need you dependent on the tribe for meaning. They need you softened, apologetic, afraid of the loneliness that comes with owning yourself. But you are reading this for a reason. Somewhere in you, there is a voice that knows you are not here to be another cog. That you were not born to kneel before the collective script. That your peace is not in passivity but in mastery. That comfort without purpose is just velvet-lined decay. So the question is not should you marry? The question is not should you rebel? The question is not should you take the risk? The question is, will this choice make my life so wholly mine that I would gladly live it again, exactly the same, for eternity? If the answer is yes, burn your ships and step forward. If the answer is no, burn your illusions and rebuild yourself until it is. Because in the end, history is not written by the safe. It is not written by the agreeable. It is written by men who are willing to stand alone until their vision is so undeniable the world has no choice but to orbit around it. And when you reach that point, when the demon comes in the dark and offers you the eternal return, you will not hesitate. You will meet his gaze, not with fear, but with hunger. And you will say, without a single doubt, again. Again. Again.